Hello, my name is Eric Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today is ceasing to avoid stillness and silence. Now, there's really a couple of things going on here because I think that we pick up this avoiding silence and stillness for two main reasons. One is as we grow up in the socialization, indoctrination we receive as children as we grow to become adults, we're taught to use any moments of silence and stillness to plan, strategize, figure out what we're going to do next. And as we grow up, we're busy, busy, busy. There's ever more things to do, more things to keep in mind. And many of us build this habit of whenever there's a moment of silence, a moment of stillness, that we need to fill it with something. Some people are very uncomfortable just being still. Just being still bothers them because they think they should be doing something. And when there's a moment of mental silence, this is also often uncomfortable because we should be doing something. And so they fill it with thinking, pondering, planning, strategizing, or otherwise filling the void. And I think this is a habit that we gain as adults to fill quiet moments with stuff. But the other aspect, the other reason I think we tend to avoid silence and stillness is it's very uncomfortable for many. Really, removing sensory stimulus, basically making things more and more silent and still, is almost a form of torture. When people are in prison and they misbehave or whatever, and the warden decides to punish them, what do? They put them in solitary confinement. And this is a punishment because now you're losing interaction. You're losing stuff to be aware of. There's more silence. There's more stillness in solitary confinement. There's not as much there to distract what's going on. And so this is considered a punishment. It's not pleasant for many. Matter of fact, some can't handle it at all, and extended times of solitary confinement can drive someone insane. They're not quite right when they come out after a long, long time in solitary confinement. Now, likewise, another step higher for this, there's a form of torture called white torture, or white room torture. And so it's solitary confinement, you're alone, but everything is white. You're dressed in white, everything in the room is white, the walls are white, it's lit in such a way it casts no shadows. And basically you're deprived color and this form of stimulus. And it's actually listed as a form of torture. And what's going on here is you're just removing more stuff to be aware of, more distraction, more variety. Ever becoming closer and closer to silence and stillness, really. And I would think that even a step further, although I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but if you lock someone in a sensory deprivation tank, it would be even more so. Because then there's really nothing to hear. It's dark, there's nothing to see. You're basically floating in a solution, so you're weightless for all intents and purposes. And there's just less and less stimuli. And some people really do not like sensory deprivation tanks. And so there's this removing of sensory awareness, of things to fill the silence, the stillness, and the void. And as it gets less and less, and there's just nothing else to be aware of, we find it more and more uncomfortable. And I think that it's a fundamental dislike, I think, for many, of silence and stillness. And it could seem like torture when It's just still and silent. And so what I'm trying to point out here is we need to become aware of this, if this tendency, if we have it, and actually, when we notice stillness and silence, instead of trying to fill the void, so to speak, just abide for a while in silence and stillness. If there's a moment of time and you notice there is a silence of mind that kind of arises and there's no thought, instead of thinking about this state, oh look what's going on, and start commenting about the state, which is just another way to fill the silence, or to use this moment to start pondering things you should have been thinking about before, or things that will be coming up, or whatever, instead of trying to get out of this state of silence, just abide as silence. I think that it's not totally uncommon for moments of silence and stillness to spontaneously arise. But we've gotten very, very good at filling the void and filling that silence and stillness, and trying to keep busy and distracted with all the things that we can see. And so become aware of this and kind of put in the new habit of, when you notice that things are silent, just let it be silent. When things are still, let it be still. Hang out and appreciate the silence and stillness for a little while. It's quite restful, quite refreshing. Now, you could also try to play an experiment with removing stimuli and seeing what happens. I know that not too long ago, I found a place that had flotation tanks, which is basically a sensory deprivation tank. And you can purchase 1-hour time slots to just hang out in a sensory deprivation tank. It is an interesting experience to just be floating with no stimuli. And so it is possible, when you're basically just floating in this tank and not touching anything, and there's nothing to see, nothing to hear, and you're floating in weightlessness of your own body temperature, so there's no stimuli even from that. Just dive into the lack of stimuli, the lack of distraction, and let things basically return, or almost entropy in a way, allow it to settle into silence and stillness, and just see what happens. Because especially when you start removing all the stimuli and distractions and things like this, the habit and conditioning and tendency to try to fill the void may kick in even more, and then that's something to notice and become aware of. Because you might find that, particularly at the beginning, if you go into a sensory deprivation tank, what could happen is thoughts will just assail you all the more, trying to fill the void instead of just being in this dark, weightless, lack of sensory environment, and just allowing the natural quietness to become the state of stillness and silence within. And so it's an interesting experiment. Similarly, I think a similar effect is doing short-term vows of silence. Because one of the ways in which we fill the void, so to speak, is talking to ourselves, to others, talking to fill the void. I mean, when people are in the room together and there's silence, so often we call it an uncomfortable silence. But why can't it be a comfortable silence? Why can't two people sit in a room comfortably silent? We have this idea that there's an uncomfortable silence. But if you take let's say a day even, extend it to a weekend or a long weekend if you want, but if you take a day and just go, for tomorrow, for the entire day, I'm not going to speak. It is kind of interesting to see how often automatic speech and thought pops up. Because somebody, might even just say, good morning, and you'll say good morning without even thinking. It was just an automatic reply. And there's all this automatic thought and thinking and speaking and stuff coming up to in response, but also to fill silence. And such an experiment could be actually extended further. I once did a solitary silent retreat. And so I went to a cabin, pretty remote. I mean, you couldn't see anyone else around. You couldn't see any other houses, couldn't see any cars. You could hear like a chainsaw in the distance, but you couldn't see or hear anybody. There was no Wi-Fi, there was no internet, there was no TV in the cabin. I didn't bring books, games, cards, writing material, nothing to just basically distract. And so I didn't want to do anything that would engage the language center, basically. So no writing, no reading, no distractions. So there's no games. Basically all that was left to me was walking around in the woods, staring out the window, observing what's going on, meditation. That was about it. There wasn't anything else to do. And when you're in an environment like this of profound silence, I mean, all you have is the sounds of nature. And that is it. And there are no distractions. There's nothing to read. There's no phones. There's no one to talk to. You're not even talking to yourself. There's no games. There's nothing to watch really, TV wise, or other distractions. All you had was this moment. This moment, and that was it. And then also I wasn't going to do things. I wasn't going to be, it's not like I brought, hobby material so I could keep myself occupied with hobbies. The point of this retreat was not to occupy myself with other things. Basically, the point of the retreat was all I had was now. So I could walk in the woods, hike in the woods, I could stare out at nature, I could meditate. That is what I could do. I did that for three days. And it was extraordinary at the end of the 3 days how deeply profound the feeling of inner silence and stillness was. But again, some people might find this very uncomfortable. I mean, I've relayed this silent, solitary retreat to others, and I've had others look at me like I was insane. They're like, I could never do that. No phone, no computer, not even a book to read, no TV, no radio, nothing. How could you do that? How could you have nothing for 3 days? And they're just shocked. And that's because they probably are not aware of it, but they are avoiding silence and stillness. Their habits, their conditioning, their beliefs, concepts are in such a way that what I was doing was unthinkable. And so what I'm again saying in this video is we need to cease avoiding silence and stillness. Become comfortable with silence and stillness. When you notice spontaneous moments of silence and stillness arising, just be with it. Enjoy it while it lasts. I mean, even if it doesn't last that long, so be it. but enjoy it while it lasts. Don't try to avoid it. Embrace it. And see where that takes you. But if you have any questions, comments, please post below. If you have not, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, so that way you get all future updates of new videos and things like that. But until next time, thank you much.